Hi everyone. So welcome to this demonstration of PATTIE for the Laboratory of Analytic Sciences. So what I'd like to do is tell you about the features behind PATTIE's interface and how everything can work for you, driven by a use case. And what I'll use is something known as Project Independence. So in 1973, Richard Nixon declared that American science, technology, and industry could free America from its dependence on imported oil and establish its energy independence. He called for the construction of thousands of nuclear power plants by the year 2000. And so let's drive PATTIE's features and functions with this in mind. So what I will do is I'll come to the search bar right here. We've got a drop-down menu here, make sure that the Nixon tapes are selected, and I will type in nuclear, just to start a very broad exploration of this data. So I'll hit search and wait for PATTIE to load these results. So I'm looking at PATTIE's clustered user interface. And what you're looking at seems to be like a word cloud, but there's many layers of intelligence here, and we'll break them down one by one. So initially, my eyes go to these two large clusters, states, nuclear, united, half power, and we see that there's some transcripts here. But my eyes also go to nuclear, states, years, and Soviet, but I'm not going to select it. Why? Because my hypothesis is that if Soviet is a cluster label in relation to the keyword nuclear, this is probably more about nuclear weapons and those capabilities than it is about nuclear power and the US homeland and how to have energy independence. So I'm going to ignore it for now. This is just a hypothesis, but this is the whole point of PATTIE's user interface, is that it helps you start asking some questions. So I'll ignore it. But now what you'll notice is that the cluster I've selected is showing me this network model. And now the thicker and darker these edges or these lines, the more semantic similarity there will be to another cluster. And the lighter these lines, like this one down here, or longer and lighter, the less semantic similarity that there will be between two clusters. So I selected this one, and now I want to go over here to size and recharge, because recharge is giving me some indicators or some signal about nuclear power. I don't know necessarily why, but the word recharge just seems relevant, so I'm going to click that. You'll notice that this cluster itself has its own relationships to all the other clusters. So I've built now this dynamic network in real time, and PATTIE's indicating to me, hey, if you're looking at these two clusters, you may want to look at these other two over here, just based on spatial proximity and the thickness of that edge. And so I am going to go to giant, satisfied, and guarantee, because the keyword giant may indicate, well, like there's a relationship to size, and there's also a relationship to nuclear power plants, potentially. This is just some of the assumptions that I'm making. So I'm also going to click on assumptions and drip. The keyword drip is queuing me in for some reason. Now what I've done is selected these four clusters, and I don't want to look at 77 transcripts and their associated audio files. So instead of looking at those and wasting time, what I would do as a user is click on the zoom in button right here. So what's going to happen is PATTIE's algorithm is going to take your selections. I'll do that one more time. PATTIE's going to take those four selections and recluster them. So this is, some may call this human in the loop AI, or real-time machine learning, whatever we want to call it. At the end of the day, what PATTIE is doing is taking your selections and reanalyzing them for all the subtopics or sub-themes inside of your selections. Now, I'm looking at a couple of clusters here that seem relevant, but for example, weapons, meeting, offensive, I'm going to ignore it, because remember, we're looking for things related to nuclear power and energy independence. And so that keyword kind of, I don't want to pay attention to it too much. But the keyword feasibility is relatively important, because what's the feasibility potentially of building a nuclear power plant, and how feasible is it to reach our goal for energy independence in the year 2000? I'm trying to put myself in the mind of Nixon and his cabinet members. So I'm going to select this because it also contains, again, that keyword recharge. Now, I can keep going. I can keep collecting clusters and zooming in, but part of this task is to learn about what is the scale of what Nixon had described as energy independence. That's one goal that I'd like to hit. So I'm going to go over to this document menu, click this button, and now I see that there's a couple of transcripts here, much more manageable set, only 5 to go through. and I can click on transcript segment, and this is going to give me some snippets of what's being described. And I have here some relatively important keywords from the segment called years, built, generate, federal energy. So I'll click on this button right here, and I can read this segment, this little snippet from an audio file, and what we'll notice is that it's got everything I'm looking for. It's got the year 2000 in here. It's also got notion of scale. So if we read through this, we'll understand that there was a certain aspired scale of energy independence that Nixon wanted to reach. And this is explicitly described in this segment. So finding this relatively quickly, that's really helpful. So this would be something that we'd want to keep or binder or jot down. And so that's a little bit about PATTIE's basic functionality. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom back out all the way to my initial stage. So here I am. And I'm going to deselect these clusters. There's a couple of extra things you can do. So if I click size and recharge, you'll notice this button down here. Keep your eyes down here on show results. As I click this, that menu goes away and comes back. I can open this menu and read one transcript at a time, or I can click this button called View All Segments. So show me all the little snippets inside this cluster. There's multiple records in here, in this case 3 different segments from audio files. But let me read them all very quickly so I can get a sense of what's inside this cluster. And that's quite helpful. So another feature is we can actually hide these edges. So maybe I've made some selections and I don't want to look at whatever this mess is. There's a ton of edges and nodes in this visualization. I can remove those edges while maintaining my 3 selections. So that's an additional feature. Now, a couple more things. Let's say, for example, you're interested in the names of people. For whatever the reason, you're interested in nuclear power or energy independence, and this is the use case that we're currently on. But you also would like to know a little bit about the names of people that have occurred or come up in these conversations of the Nixon White House tapes. So with the same query and the same set of data, I'll come up here to this entity recognition bar and I will click people. When I click this button, PATTIE is going to now reanalyze these results for the names of people that have come up in conversations and how those conversations are related to each other. So again, these are not speakers because we're assuming that we have multi-party conversational audio, that we have not identified who is speaking, but rather the names of people that have come up in these conversations organically. And then we analyze those conversations. PATTIE will cluster them and provide you some representative labels. So Bill Rogers and Mike Smith, if that's his name, or Smith and Mike, conversations that came up on nuclear energy potentially are related to conversations where the word Brianna, Truman, and Smith and Rogers also came up. So there's a semantic relationship between these clusters of conversations, and perhaps those are people of interest, and then I can explore these different transcripts. Now I also have a couple of other options. I can look at these transcripts, or I can listen to the audio of this transcript. So I can go directly and scrub the timeline and get a sense of what was discussed. Maybe the transcript is a bit noisy or unclear. So instead I want to go directly to the source and listen to the audio. And we have a couple of extra entities here, like organizations or geopolitical entities. So I'll just run through those relatively quickly. These are essentially giving you different lenses over the data. So every time we have a piece of data where nuclear is discussed, what are different geopolitical entities that came up in those conversations? So China and Germany were discussed with respect to nuclear capabilities. Now, I don't know if this is nuclear weapons or nuclear power plants, but nonetheless, PATTIE has the ability to provide me these different lenses to get a sense of what's inside of this data and help me generate some questions to ask. So that's a little bit about PATTIE. I hope that's helpful, and thank you so much for watching.